going to be a struggle.
Tide and wind going in opposite directions could create some pretty big waves and some pretty choppy conditions. Maybe even capsized.
I'll keep my eye on the barometer on my watch, and it's falling.
I think we're going to stay here for the day. The reason is we've got to get going today. We've left instructions with somebody back home that if we're not back in contact with them by 8 o'clock tonight, to notify the Coast Guard.
Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. We are on Loch Etive, and we've been up in Scotland for 3 days already, practicing and waiting for the weather to improve really. And our boats are extremely heavy with equipment. We're out for hopefully 3 days. 4 days, 3 nights. We're currently going across from Taymult to the northern shore of Loch Etive. So we're going across the narrows of Bonor, and we're about an hour, half an hour before slack water, so not much of a current, no wind to speak of anyway. Now we were intending on getting going for about 9:30 this morning, and the weather was just shocking, and we've been faffing about so much with gear, trying to get it in the boats, or in and on the boats, and it took forever, but we are where we are now. What we've got with us is what we've got with us, so we're going to crack on and see how far we get. We wanted to try and do 8 or 9 miles today, so that could be a bit difficult considering it's now 12:30 and it gets dark at about 5. So we're just going to have to see where we get to. We might have to use a different camping spot. So just on the shore here is Bonor Quarry, which I think I'm right in saying is a granite quarry and one of the biggest in Europe. I don't think you can see most of it from here. I think a lot of it is behind the mountain. But that's really the only scar on the landscape here. It's stunning scenery. I'll put the camera to the front so you can see. This is perfect paddling, other than there's no sun, but it's not raining, the water is just still, there's no wind, it's not cold, and you're in a fantastic place. So the boats are really heavy, as I said. In front of me, under the camera, I've got a deck bag, and that's mostly got all of my filming equipment in. So there's a drone, batteries, video camera, power bank, all that sort of stuff. I've got the wake of a fishing boat coming over. Behind me on the deck, I've got the wood burning stove that you've seen in other videos. So that's added about 7 kilograms to the back deck, and obviously it's on top, so it's made the boat a bit tippy along with the deck back. We've got fishing gear, we've got 4 days of food, and then in the back we've got all the sleeping stuff, spare clothes, first aid, things like that, and more food. And on Julie's boat, she's the same, except for she hasn't got a deck bag, but she's got the big hot tent rolled up in a black bag on the back deck of her boat. So I did some rough calcs, and I think my boat comes in, with me in it, comes in at about 135 kilo. The weight limit for the boat's 150. And I think Julie's boat comes in at something like 120. So heavy boats. Thankfully we're not going into a headwind. No wind at all. It's amazing. The colours on the hills at this time of year, just incredible. This little island up ahead would be good for fishing, I would expect, but I haven't got time for that today. Got to try and get to our camp with some daylight left. To set up and find a bit of firewood and all that lot. I think there'll be a very quick stop somewhere for a drink and a snack, and then push on. So on the island in front, there's a load of seals. I think if we stay left, try not to bother them too much. Yeah, there's all the seals. I think they're happy to sit there while we go past. Looks like there's some fairly young there this year's. They're not panicking. I think they are quite used to people boating and kayaking and looking at them. I think the time to stay away from them really is between March and September, because that's when their mating season, etc. So I believe. And there's one just popped up. Magic. Interestingly enough, earlier in the year we went on a wildlife watching boat trip in Orapole, and the guide was saying that kayakers are a nuisance because they go out to the islands and where the seals and things are, and it scares the seals away. But the seals don't they leave that colony and they don't habitat it anymore. And his theory is that the silhouette of a kayaker looks like a killer whale, an orca, and obviously orcas like eating seals. But so far we've been in the sea twice in our kayaks and seals haven't been bothered. In fact, they followed us yesterday. Whether that was a territorial thing or a curiosity thing, I don't know. But I've watched a lot of other videos of other kayakers and canoeists, etc. And they all get the same. The seals follow them. So, I don't know. I'm not a seal expert. But they certainly don't seem to be fazed by us. So we're coming into the widest part of the loch now. It's about a mile wide. And if you can see on the GoPro, I don't know if you can, but straight ahead is that point, that headland, and there's a woodland just to the left of it. We're going to head over there. There's a beach marked on the map, and have a drink, maybe a bite to eat. And then it should only be from there a couple of miles really to the area where we want to camp. Absolutely perfect conditions. Huh? Yeah. So we've got camp very quickly thrown up, and I did really want to get further up the loch, another few mile, but by the time we got to this point it was 2:30, so we only paddled 2 hours, but we did about 6 mile. This morning when we were breaking camp, I bent down in the tent to pick up some kindling, just a little bundle of kindling that I chopped to bring with us, and I felt my back go, and it's really started to seize up on paddle in, so I'm sort of walking like an old man at the moment, looking for firewood, driftwood, but yeah, I'm going to find some wood, get some water, probably have to walk up upstream here a little bit. We've got this river, I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but this river comes down into the loch, and up there I can hear a waterfall, so not very far, near that oak tree, and we'll go there, get 5 litres of water, that'll do us for the night, get some firewood, and then we're going to settle in a bit more. So I'm just wandering along the beach, and in this pile of debris that's been washed ashore, it's horse hoof fungus, and yeah, I think that's been in the water quite a long time, but that's the fungus that you can make Armadoo from. which is a tinder. We'll take a spark, and you would process that and boil it and all the rest of it and dry it out and make a tinder. And it's very, very, very old way. I think there was a guy a few years back, a guy fell out the end of a glacier, like a caveman type guy, and in his pouch he had armadillo. So it goes back tens of thousands of years. So the water's almost flat calm now, and I think that's because it's almost high tide. Certainly down at Bonor, where we set off from, Tainol area. Probably another hour or two later up this end, but hopefully it's not going to find its way all the way up the beach here and flood us out in the night. I don't think so. Absolutely amazing. It's so peaceful. No noise, no people, no cars, nothing. Just the sound of a waterfall in the background. We just heard a stag roaring, because it is the rut this time of year. We've seen quite a few deer. It's just absolutely fantastic. The scenery is just spectacular. And with all the problems this morning, trying to pack everything in the boats for the first time, and it was raining and the wind was getting up. It was almost, oh stuff it, let's go back to the campsite. But we didn't, and we kept going. And coming across this bay here, from that headland right over there, that was actually quite rough earlier on, because I think what was happening was the tide had turned and it was pushing water into the loch, and so the waves, the swell was coming from behind, and so it was picking up the back of the boats and changing the boat's direction. And yeah, probably the toughest paddling I've done so far, which I'm a total novice obviously, but yeah, learned quite a bit paddling in those conditions earlier. And that's what it's about learning and exploring. So we're going to get some tea on in a bit. I think we're going to have steak and rice. I haven't got the fishing rod out yet. I was just so busy setting up, getting a fire going, and just enjoying the tranquility. handle for the camp. How's this for a view from camp? There's an otter, a sea otter. There he is. There she is. Wow. It's 11 o'clock in the morning and we're only leaving camp. It's taken us far too long to pack up and organise stuff and load the boats. I suppose that'll get easier the more we do it, get better practice at it. So today we're going to head on up the loch. If we can, get to the top of the loch and then make camp somewhere near a few miles from here, hopefully. And so the tide's just coming, still going out at the moment, the tide. So we're going to be fighting it for a couple of hours. Not that I think it's going to be much of a problem this far up the loch. But there's no wind. The water is just like glass. Absolutely fantastic. Today's supposed to be the best day, weather-wise, of our whole trip up here, of our whole week and a bit. So enjoy it. And I think what we'll be doing possibly tomorrow is heading back to the truck if we can. The forecast is due to get really bad tomorrow. Rain all day and 20 odd mile an hour winds with almost up to 30-mile-an-hour gusts. Whether that comes true, we don't know, because, as I've said, the forecast up here, it changes so much. Most of the time the forecast isn't reliable. So we may, depending on conditions, we may try and head back to the truck tomorrow. Or, if we get stormed in, well, we're going to have a day in a tent somewhere up on the loch, and paddle out all the way on Friday. Or it may be that we paddle some of the way tomorrow, camp, and the rest on Friday. Who knows? But for now, I'm just going to enjoy this magnificent scenery and paddling. So all the oak woodlands on the north shore, up at the end of the loch here, ancient woodland. There's oak and birch, and it's I think it's part of the Caledonian forest when it used to spread all across Scotland. Some of these trees will be a lot older than they look because they grow slower up here than down in the south of the UK and what have you, because of the harsh winters and the winds. So at some point later on we need to find a campsite on this shore. Nothing jumping out at me as spectacular at the moment, but we'll find something, I'm sure. Just amazing. Sun's out. It's red hot in these dry suits, but I can see the end of the loch from here as well, the head of the loch. Probably a good couple of mile away still. About an hour's paddle. But the mountains all around. I think that's Ben Starav You've got Loch Etive Moor and all that up there in towards Glencoe. The tops of the mountains are in the cloud today. I'm just heading up here a bit because there's a spot I saw on the map that might be good as a wild camp. I've seen a few places we could camp later, but it'll actually be easier later on the way back because we're on low tide at the moment, so it'll be easier to land later on when the water's a little bit higher. Yeah, absolutely stunning. And all I can hear is the waterfall. One that side, one that side. No people. We haven't seen any people since leaving the truck. Seen lots of deer, seals, otter. Not seen an eagle yet. It's absolutely spectacular. The water's nice and calm. It's nice and warm. It's not raining. It's not windy. It's all going to change tonight, but so we're just checking out possible camp spots for the way back along the shore. And you can see the head of the loch up right in front with the big mountains and the little forest at the bottom. So we're probably only, what, a mile and a half now probably from the end of the loch. Half an hour's paddle. And then when we get there, we're going to have some lunch and a drink and enjoy the scenery, and then work our way back and find somewhere to camp. It has been an absolutely fantastic paddle this morning so far. I think it's actually this afternoon now. Well, we're at the head of the loch and the weather's definitely turned. We've got quite a strong wind now from behind. Probably 10-12 mile an hour, I would say, something like that. It's chucking a few waves up. Now I'm not certain if right at the far end of the loch here, if the tide would still be trying to move outwards. I would perhaps have thought not, but I'm just thinking with if the tide and the wind are going in opposite directions, that could be a reason for the waves. But we're going to have a bite of lunch, something quick and simple, because it's actually quite cold. And I was going to put the drone up in the air, but I think it's a bit blustery. The clouds are certainly moving along. You look at them against the mountains. So we've landed on the sandbar, pebble bar, right where the River Etive flows into the head of the loch. And if it was a bit warmer and a bit sunnier, it'd be lovely. This wind could cause us a few issues trying to get back down the loch to find somewhere to camp, so we'll see how we go. So we're setting off from the head of Loch Etive, and we're against the tide now. And it's pretty windy, got the wind and the tide against us. This is going to be a struggle. Keep paddling. That's it. So our plan is to get over to the northern shore and stay fairly close to the shore and follow it to a campsite, hopefully in an hour or two. And hopefully we'll get a bit of shelter from the wind, at least if we go across there. I'm just going past where the River Etive comes into the loch. A lot of play boating further up on the River Etive, white water. mile back up the loch now, and conditions are much improved, much calmer. Still a breeze paddling into, but we're making progress. It's, no big waves anymore. So now we're on the lookout for a camp, but we'll probably get another hour in, I think, before we camp, if we can. Even less to do tomorrow or the next day. I'll keep my eye on the barometer on my watch, and it's falling. It is falling, so it would appear that we are going to get some rough weather. Probably coming overnight. So we really want to find a decent camp. Find plenty of firewood. Make sure the tent's set up really well, because we might be there for 2 nights, I think. Looking at the forecast and looking at the barometer and the sky, we could be in for it. Deer running up the hill.
What?
Deer running up the hill. that was a day. We've probably done about 6 or 7 mile, I would say, and averaging about 3 mile an hour. And we've had everything today, from perfect glass conditions and sun to quite choppy, windy, and a little bit of drizzle, and complete opposites within 20 minutes. And that's Scotland for you. That's the weather here. It changes like that, and that's what I like about it. It's a challenge. Everything's a bit of a challenge. It's not me against nature, it's just the challenge of doing these expeditions in these not so easy to get to places. So, you know, to get to where we're camping tonight, you've got quite a walk. Well, I've got a long drive first of all, and then quite a walk, and or it's a boat of some sort. But what a spot, overlooking the loch. Got the wood burner lit now, and I think we're just going to have a drink because I'm really thirsty now and very tired. My back has been really giving me some jip. After about an hour and a half in the boat, it starts to really start aching. So I'm going to try and stretch out tonight, and I've got some deep heat with me, get some of that on there, and try and relieve that for tomorrow. Still not certain what we're going to do tomorrow. It's going to depend on the weather, I think. At the minute it's nice and still, but could be completely different by the morning.
Okay.
That's a very different day today. It's about 7:30 in the morning, and I think we've just reached high tide, maybe 20 minutes ago. And the tide's just turning. This is the loch today. Got a bit of a few waves, nothing major, but out in the middle of the loch, I don't know if you can make that out, there is a hell of a current. It's probably surface driven by the wind. We're behind this little sheltered knoll, and that was quite deliberate last night, obviously, when we pitched camp. But now, out there, if you can see the foam on the water, that's moving past at quite a rate of knots. My worry is, because the wind's coming up the loch, supposed to be up to about a 20 mile an hour wind today, and now the tide's turning and going out, tide and wind going in opposite directions could create some pretty big waves and some pretty choppy conditions. I'm just walking out onto this point here, and yeah, the wind's picking up
just walking out onto this headland, this little headland. I'm sure we could kayak in that. It's what it's going to turn into. That's the problem. And whether the wind's going to get stronger. I think what I'm going to do, I think we're going to have some breakfast and see how it develops as the tide goes out. As the tide starts to go out against the wind, and see what the water condition is like, and we'll make a call from there. Well, we were sort of expecting to be stormed in, so not that we're stormed in at the moment, but I don't think I'd want to try crossing the loch, which is what I'd like to do, because then we're on the side of the loch where the trough is, rather than having to cross at Bonor Narrows, because if it's going to get worse as we go towards the sea. It's going to get windier, more swell, bigger waves, and trying to cross Bonor Narrows in rough conditions wouldn't be good. So what I wanted to do was try and cross the loch, and then we're on the right shore. But I just think the wind speed out there would be an issue for us. Anyway, it's raining, so I'm going to get in, have a cup of tea, and we'll go from there. So we've had a walk up onto the headland behind us, and there's a good sort of steady 15 mile an hour breeze, wind coming down the loch, and the rain's in your face, and it's pretty choppy the other side of this headland. So, and the tide is about to turn as well and go out, so the tide and the wind will be going opposite ways, and I think that's going to make it even worse. And we've got all the foam coming down the middle of the loch. Well, obviously that's been whipped up and created somehow further up towards the sea. So I just feel that if we were to actually set off, we're probably only going to get a mile or 2 miles and then just go, this is too much, and end up having to camp somewhere, and probably somewhere that isn't as good and as sheltered as this, because here we've got plenty of wood, plenty of firewood. There's loads of dead wood just lying about. We've got a good water source. There's a stream not far away. We've got everything set up. We've got the wood stove. So it seems a bit silly to risk this camp spot for probably a worse camp spot in a couple of miles' time, after we've got freezing cold and wet, maybe even capsized, and all the hassle and problems that that's going to bring with it. So I think we're going to be camp bound for the day. And you know, this was forecast. We knew that the weather was potentially going to turn for the worst today, and it's meant to be a lot better tomorrow. Let's hope that that forecast is still right. We've got no phone signal here in this location, so we can't check the weather. That's a slight issue, and we also can't contact home and let them know that we're okay, etc. So I think we're going to stay here for the day. So it's about 7 o'clock now in the morning, 1st of November, and conditions aren't great, but they are looking better than yesterday from what I can see at the moment. Got a bit of rain in the air, doesn't seem to be too much wind, and it's going to be high tide here in probably an hour. So the plan is to pack up, get the boats loaded, and then catch the outgoing tide out of here. The forecast for today, now I'm going on a forecast that I read a few days ago, said very light wind, and the wind coming from the northwest, northwest. So if that forecast still comes to fruition, that will also help us get down the loch, because the wind will be pushing us from behind and going with the tide, so less chance of big waves, hopefully. But at the minute, certainly near the shore, it looks fine for us to get on the water, and that's the plan. Gonna have a drink, pack up, and get going as soon as it's light enough. The reason is we've got to get going today. We've left instructions with somebody back home that if we're not back in contact with them by 8 o'clock tonight, to notify the Coast Guard. So we need to make a move. Following the GoPro gremlins, we got the boats loaded up and we're away in quite timely fashion, and we followed the route indicated by the red line on the map, going from our camp at the green circle at the top of that red line towards Rue Bar, the headland. And along the way we bumped into a threesome, 2 people in a Canadian type canoe and another one in a kayak around the Bar's Lodge area, and they were heading up the loch to climb some of the Munros. And we exchanged pleasantries and asked about the weather because we hadn't had an up-to-date forecast. They said it was improving in the afternoon, and that was kind of it. They'd spent the night in the bothy, and yeah, we all went on our ways. Once we got to the headland, Rue Bar, I suggested to Julie that we head across the bay, and I will try and pronounce this correctly, Bar Nadalach, and stick to the northern shore. She misunderstood that and interpreted it that we were crossing the loch, and I think because we'd discussed crossing the loch a few times to get to the southern shore and therefore be on the same shore as the truck, and to prevent us having to cross the narrows of Bunor, I think she sort of took it that that's what I meant, and I set off thinking that she was following me, and she set off thinking that's what we were doing, we were crossing the loch. After about 5 minutes of paddling, I checked to see where she was, and she was quite away from the shore and out of communication distance because of the wind. The wind was reasonably strong at that point. I'd say maybe 15 miles an hour. So I was left with a decision really to make, and that was, do I continue on my heading and following the North Shore, or do I intersect Julie and we take it from there, which is obviously what I decided to do. And by the time I got to her, so I kind of diverted south from my heading to intersect her, but obviously that intersection point was pretty much in the middle of the loch. By this point the wind was up to easily 20 mile an hour, and there was some fairly heavy water for our little kayaks in the middle of the loch. I mean, we were dealing with sort of 3-foot waves, and the option of simply turning back to the North Shore or going straight across the loch to the southern shore, it wasn't really an option because the waves were travelling north up the loch and they would have been broadsiding us. So, and with our top heavy kayaks with the stuff on the decks, it just wasn't an option to cut across the loch. So we were halfway there to the southern shore already, so I thought, well, we may as well now continue to the southern shore, and then that saves crossing the loch later on to get back to our vehicle. So we had to sort of take quite a shallow angle, so bow into the waves and kind of slicing through the waves and gradually working our way to the southern shore. And that was really done by heading towards the islands near Inverleither Bay, or Inverleither Bay, and we basically aimed for those islands and went between those islands as indicated there by the red line, and then made it to a shore, a boggy, seaweedy shore on Inverleither Bay, where We had a drink, a quick bite to eat, regrouped, calmed the nerves, and we then set off and followed the south shore all the way back to Tainol. Along the way though, the wind was incredibly strong, and at times we were barely moving, and we were using every little bay to try and get some shelter and make some ground. And it took from Inverleither Bay, I would say it took about 2 hours for us to get to Tainol. And once we got to within about a mile and a half of Tainol, the wind was no longer an issue. It was a lot more sheltered down towards Bonall, but further up the loch, the wind was howling up there from the southwest, and not only was that making the paddling difficult, it was creating some quite heavy water for us to deal with, and it was creating a lot of spray as well. After the event, it was all very exciting and fun, obviously. Neither of us capsized, neither of us went for a swim, and it all ended well. There's one picture that I took of the kayaks on the beach in Inverleither Bay, and that's the only still photograph that I took. I couldn't use my GoPro, it was raining, I wasn't going to get my video camera out, and I got my phone out because we had a signal there to notify our land contact that we were okay and we weren't that far from the truck and everything else. And while I had my phone out, I quickly took that picture. So that was the conditions. You can see the islands in the background there, but visibility was okay. It wasn't great, and it was quite an exciting morning, to be fair. For people with very little kayaking experience and new to it, with cheap boats, and it was just a bit of determination and grit that just got us through that, and everything was fine. So, like I say, we then made our way to Tainol, and the first hour of that was tough going, very tough going, very strong headwind, and a lot of spray, fairly big water, but not as big as it was out past the islands. I mean, that was, at some points I had the front of my boat actually going under the water, under the waves. The waves were breaking over the front of the boat, and fair play to the little cheap kayaks. They did the job, and yeah, it was exciting after the event, but at the time, a bit worrying. I wouldn't say scary, but worrying. So that's what happened. That's how I can best get that last half day across to you as a viewer. I can't provide you with any video footage because of the GoPro problem. So I thought maybe the maps with some lines on there, just to try and explain the route that we took and how that ended us in some heavy water. And the lessons learned for us as newbies to this is make sure that the person that you're with understands what it is that you've said. And secondly, stay closer together at all times. And if that communication is then a lot easier, and any problems or off route people in the party can be corrected sooner rather than later. And it's not anybody's fault per se, it's just I had one thing in my mind and Julie had one thing in her mind, and it got to the stage where to go back to fix it to where it went wrong was not the right thing to do. The right thing to do was to carry on across the loch, brave the conditions, because if we'd have gone back to the headland where we went separate ways, then we would have had to cross the loch again later in the day, and that could have had another set of problems. As it turned out, when we got to Bonor, the water was very calm, very calm. So I had my original idea of following the North Shore, cutting across the bay, follow the North Shore back to Bonor and then cross. That would have worked out great, but we perhaps wouldn't have had the excitement and experience. And this is the thing, to get experience, you have to put yourself in situations that make you uncomfortable. And it's the same with the mountaineering that I've done over the years. You never get better if you don't push your comfort zone. And that's what happened. It wasn't intentional, but that is what happened. And I think if we were in water that was only half of what that was on that day, it wouldn't worry us. I think we could handle the water. 3 foot waves in those little boats, that's quite a lot. And they are only 3.5 metre long, recreational touring kayaks. They're not sea kayaks, they're not full-blown touring kayaks. They're mini touring kayaks. So it was a full-on experience, and we've both got dry suits, we've both got good buoyancy aids, so I wasn't worried if one of us went in the water. I do think we would have been able to effect a rescue of some sort, or even a tow if need be, and I think we would have sorted it out. So, having realised that I'd lost the footage of the final day, I've come back to Loch Etive just to finish the video really. We're on our way home, and we've got a pass, Tainult, to go home. So I thought I'd come back and sign off the video. If you've not done Loch Etive and you're into your canoeing or your kayaking, it's definitely worth coming and doing. And we've had a fantastic time on this loch. Lovely calm day today, and the tide's a lot higher as well. Launching here and coming in at low tide is quite difficult. The rocks, it's very shallow and the rocks are very slippy, covered in seaweed. But obviously if you launch at high tide and you're going up the loch, you are going to fight the outgoing tide. So make that call. Wish we could go again, but unfortunately we've got to go back home to work and everything else. So thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, please hit the like button, it really helps the channel. And if you haven't subscribed and you like this sort of thing, please do. See you soon.